Welcome back to Left in the Attic. I'm Anna.
And I'm Deep. Today, we're talking about money in politics, corruption in D.C., and the affordability crisis. We're really excited to feature our special guest today, Melat Kiros, who's running against Diane DeGette. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yay. And yeah, Deep, I saw you got a haircut. Looks nice.
Congrats on the
thank
haircut.
You. Shout out to my barber, Ralph. Ralph the Dragon, actually. He's great. He's in Uptown. While we were getting this haircut, his stand randomly just collapsed. All of his barber equipment went everywhere. We just looked at each other, we cleaned it up a little bit. He got cut, unfortunately. But he's a trooper, put on some bandages and finished the cut. But I was only halfway through when all of the barber equipment kind of collapsed. So I was like, oh my God, I have a podcast to do today. But he was a trooper. We finished it. He's great. Shout out. How was your weekend, though? I saw you volunteered for something.
Yeah. So I volunteered this last weekend for the first time with Denver Urban Debate League. I don't know if y'all have heard.
Oh, I
Deep,
haven't.
I could totally see Deep being a speech debate kid. Were you in high school?
I was.
Mm.
I have a really interesting story with this. There was this Indian family who did speech and debate a lot. And they're like, hey, Deep, you would be really good at this. So I went to speech and debate. They drove me. And for speech and debate, you have to drive places, right? It's not like Yale was. So they drove me to a speech and debate tournament. I ended up winning Outstanding Speaker. It was called Forensic. So I won my first competition ever. But that Indian family never drove me ever again. So I had no ride. My parents couldn't drive me. So I did it once, won, and retired.
Wait, so you only participated in one speech and debate event?
One speech and debate event.
Okay.
Can't do that. That's
Yeah,
just not polite.
But
Stay
you know,
at home,
respect
apparently.
those parents a little bit. About, like,
Absolutely.
we gotta take out the competition.
Yeah, without question. And they did. They succeeded. You
Yeah.
didn't go on your own?
That's true.
Yeah.
Nope. Did
Well,
not have the rides.
One of the things that's actually super cool about Denver Urban Debate League is that they make speech and debate accessible to students at Title I schools. Normally, it's really expensive. They pay the judges, but here with Denver Urban Debate League, it's volunteer judges. I volunteered and judged an improv where students had to pick one of 3 little pieces of paper, and then they had 7 minutes to plan and give their speech. They got up in front of a room of other kids and me as the judge, and it was just so cool to see students from all across the Denver metro area, Aurora. I also got to see a debate round varsity. I was shadow judging, and they talked about cutting government funding for scientists and science, and I was like, whoa, this hits way too close to home, but all in all, it restored my hope and faith in our next generation. So
I love that.
So sometimes at the Capitol, student groups will come talk to state legislatures. The biggest days are usually the Students Demand Action Days, and that's when students are advocating better gun control because obviously their lives are in jeopardy. They'll come to the Capitol, and you'll see these high school students who are sophomores, juniors, seniors, debating state legislatures, and they're running circle around the legislators. This gives me a little bit of hope for the future. You kids should vote eventually because youth aren't voting at the rate they should, but it gives me confidence.
That's really incredible to hear. I'm honestly not surprised because those are folks that are practicing the art of debate and understanding policy. Politicians are doing that anymore, so I'm not surprised.
This is a good segue, so let's give a little bit more introduction to yourself. So you are a recovering lawyer, now a Ph.D. student, currently a barista, and you have decided to do the big, tall task of challenging 30-year incumbent Diane DeGette, who represents Congressional District 1 here in Denver. Pretty big challenge, pretty huge, but recently you've been endorsed by Justice Democrats. This is the same group that had previously endorsed AOC's challenge and a couple other folks. So it's pretty big. How'd you end up here? Like, what's your motivations?
everybody listening to the pod should definitely check out Melat's Instagram and the video. It was so good.
Thank you. It was so much fun to film. It's funny because the story behind the video is also the story behind how I got into this whole thing. The person who filmed the video is a really great friend of mine. His name is Jackson. He and I met working on another campaign in the 4th District on John Pedora's campaign.
Oh, shout out John Pedora.
Shout out John Pedora doing the hard work of trying to flip CD4. We met on that campaign and we're talking about the reality of politics today and how money is just infiltrated everything and how it's really prevented candidates like John who are talking about the issues that people care about, fighting for the policies that, the majority of Americans want to see, but he doesn't actually get anywhere because he's kind of going up against the machine. We started figuring out, okay, what do we need to do? What do we need to change? And ultimately, we need to get people in Congress that are committed to fighting for the working people and not for their wealthy donors and corporate PACs. And obviously, we want to reverse Citizens United. Obviously, we want to do publicly financed elections, but we need to actually have a majority in Congress that can accomplish that. And that means, the new litmus test has to be no more votes for corporate PAC people. When 80% of Congress is taking corporate PAC money, that's what we're up against. But to kind of reverse back a little bit, I'm 28. I immigrated here in 98 when I was a baby. My dad got picked with the diversity visa lottery program. So I'm literally here by chance, which is kind of a theme that really resonates with me in a lot of ways. But yeah, I'm a recovering lawyer. I'm taking a leave of absence from my Ph.D. program right now to really focus on this campaign. It was when Trump won last November when I was just like, oh, okay, so we screwed this up again. And on top of that, Democrats are still not acknowledging why we lost, what they did wrong, and are probably not going to do a good job of resisting this administration. We're almost a year in, and they have not done a good job.
It just feels like it's been forever.
It does. Yeah. And that's what happens when you're in an administration where they have no regard for the Constitution, institutions, rules, anything. They're just moving hard, breaking everything as quickly as they can because it's so hard to rebuild after that. And I just have no faith whatsoever in the Democrats that we have today to, even if we take back the House and take back the White House, for them to rebuild what's been broken and to rebuild it in a way that's actually going to be meaningfully helpful to everyday working people. That's the challenge that we're facing. Because if we just get back the same kind of Democrats that go back to business as usual, yeah, we might have 4 years in the White House, but we are going to have another reckoning with some other demagogue like Trump, and it'll probably be worse than what we are seeing right now, and that we're already in the depths of it. So yeah, it really was just a matter of we have to, like, we don't have a choice. Someone has to try and unseat these establishment Democrats that have been in office for decades, even the ones that sound like they're voting the right way. At the end of the day, when you are taking money from the same corporations that are responsible for what got us into this mess, you need to be held accountable for that. And right now, no one has really held to get account. So that's what we're doing. Yeah.
Oh no, this is really exciting. So when did you actually make the decision though? Like, I'm gonna run?
Literally November 4th, the night that Trump won. Jackson and I had just kind of been talking about stuff beforehand. And then I think it was like the morning after, I had been thinking about it that night too. He texted me, he was like, so when are we going to do this? And I'm like, let's just do it now. Like, we have to. And I think we're seeing the same energy across the country, right? It's not just about 30 years in office, over $5 million in corporate PAC money. There are so many reasons to get her out, for sure. But this is a nationwide issue that we're seeing where the establishment is responsible for what got us here. They're responsible for Trump. And that lack of acknowledgement is what kept voters at home last election.
So if I'm putting on my skeptic's hat, right?
Let's do it.
A Denver Democrat was probably like, hey, Diane DeGette, she's like, maybe she's not out there and progressive and a member of the squad, but she's quite progressive. She's good on most issues. Yeah. She's not really a trailblazer, but I'm okay with that, right? Yeah. How do you get people to like vote against DeGette when she hasn't actually caused too much controversy if you're not really looking beneath the hood?
Definitely. She hasn't caused a lot of controversy, but she also hasn't really done anything to advance the progressive agenda. I think a lot of establishment Democrats hide behind a voting record. And I think we saw with the last government shutdown ending that the voting record doesn't show the whole story. It's not a coincidence that the 8 senators that ended up voting to end the shutdown are not up for re-election this next cycle. They go into a closed door room, have a conversation about who's going to take the votes that protect them in their seats so that they don't have to be challenged in their districts. I can't say what votes DeGette does that for, if she does that at all, but the reality is the only thing we can use to really understand who it is that these people are representing, who's keeping them in office. Their number one priority is to get reelected. The only way to win campaigns is by fundraising. 94% of the people that are in the House right now outspent their opponents. So money is the name of the game. If the people funding your campaigns are the corporations that have gotten us into this mess, it doesn't stand up to me. The voting record that you have, you are part of this establishment that has allowed these corporations to push the kind of policies we're seeing in Congress today that aren't doing anything to support American people or are actively harming their ability to live with dignity in this country.
Yeah, no, 100%. Actually, staying on this whole money in politics, as somebody who is now more tuned into politics than I have been in the past, Citizens United is something that was a new term for me. I would love if either one of you wanted to talk more about what Citizens United is.
Throwing our lawyer hats on. Citizens United is a Supreme Court decision. The U.S. Supreme Court made a decision, said money is equal to speech, and the way you spend it cannot have any restrictions because of the First Amendment. Citizens United was a case in which they came out with a movie against Hillary Clinton, saying Hillary Clinton's corrupt. It was paid for by a billionaire shadowy group. It went up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, as long as you're not working hand in hand with a candidate, you have First Amendment rights, and you can spend whatever you want because money is speech. So you can spend it however you want. However, you can't coordinate. So candidates, like if you were to donate to a candidate, I think for Congress, you can only donate up to $7,000, right? But if you're a billionaire, you can just pour in $20 million into something else that says, elect Melat for Congress, right? And what happens is elect Melat for Congress just can't talk to Melat's campaign. And there's these ways to do coordination behind the scenes. And as someone who has worked on campaigns and still advises on campaigns, you see this all the time. We call it the hard side versus the soft side. So hard side is a campaign side, right? So the campaign itself, hard money, because they can direct where it goes. And the outside of it, it's called soft money, or the soft side. People, before they set up a soft side, will actually meet with people who will run their soft side, because you're not coordinating before the paperwork is filed. So you're like, hey, I'm going to run for governor, and I'm going to run with these issues and these ideas. I would love for you to run the soft side, all that stuff. Here's my donor list. You should talk to these people. They'll be willing to do it. And then once the wall goes up, you don't coordinate anymore, but you're basically still coordinating. Yeah. Citizens United happened around the early 2010s, late 2000s.
Yeah, I think it was 2010.
Did I miss anything?
But I would just add the distinction that matters is the difference between spending and receiving. There are still individual limits that people have. It's like $3,500 for a congressional campaign. There are different levels depending on state and local too. The spending piece is where the speech part comes in. This is where the super PACs come in, where they can spend however much they want because they're not coordinating with the campaigns. They found all kinds of ways to get around this. Like they do coordinate with the campaigns. They just try and get it off the books as much as they can. For example, there will be a super PAC that wants to use footage the campaign has shot. The campaign puts it on a public YouTube site. So now anyone can take it. The super PAC picks it up from there. That's coordination. But because it's not actively shifting hands, it doesn't count, and we can't hold them to account for it. Citizens United is directly responsible for the impact we are seeing in spending in campaigns right now. And I think the other thing that's really frustrating for a lot of folks is that, yes, we can agree corporations are spending way too much. Wealthy individuals are spending way too much. But it's also just the sheer amount of money that's being spent in campaigns. It was like $1 billion or something that they were spending in the last cycle in the presidential campaigns. What could we do with that money if we're not spending it on campaigns and we're not in a constant election cycle? There are a lot of things that we have to tweak in how we run these elections, but Citizens United is a big part of it. I think because reversing it requires a constitutional amendment that feels impossible to a lot of people. And so it feels like people have accepted money's in politics, like it is what it is. And we'll try and get around as much as we can, but they accept it as an environmental condition of where we're at. I refuse to believe that. We can change it and we should change it because that's the only way we can bring about the kind of policies we want to see. As long as we see the spending in politics that we have today, we're never going to get Medicare for all. We're never going to get enough people elected who want to fight for it. If that's what we need to be doing to help working people, we have to start with the money in politics issue.
Yeah. Well, that's helpful.
Yeah.
I've been at election watch parties and celebration nights where the Denver Dems will have a hotel downtown. Elections end at 7 o'clock, then the soft side people roll in and like, hey, we can talk to you again. And it's like, oh my God, clearly there's coordination happening. To something that the listeners might be more familiar with, Elon Musk, who got a top position in Trump's administration and ran his ideology through Trump's administration through Doge that you're really familiar with.
Tears over here. I got Doged, but
he gave $200 million to Trump's soft side. You don't think they were coordinating? Of course they were.
This was actually really helpful because I had no idea how, okay, again, as somebody with a limited background in politics and such, I never knew how that all was coordinated. When they would say, like, Elon poured X amount of money into Trump's campaign. Yeah. It's like, how is this happening when there are these limits, but the soft side, hard side, that makes sense.
And the other thing is the issue campaigns that they use, right? Sometimes they will use these groups to not even be advocating for a candidate. For example, one of the things Elon Musk did, he poured $20 million from his trust because the man doesn't pay taxes on anything. He poured it in from his trust, and it was for Trump women it was the
Trump
pro-abortion
RPG.
women for Trump. Yes, Trump RBG.
pack.
Yes.
RBG
And it was
Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Yeah. And it was just a video of some woman that they used to target women that were pro-abortion but could potentially swing on Trump. He spent $20 million on this ad that he aired directly into all these
200
households.
million.
20 million. No, 200 million total.
Total.
But 20
on
million
this.
for this ad
for that ad.
specifically,
Okay.
for this one particular ad to turn out more women.
What's a couple $100 million between friends?
I mean, that's my thing, right? They buy elections like they're buying a cup of coffee. It's nothing. It's literally nothing to them. And the ROI that they're getting on paying for these elections and buying these people, the tax cuts that they're getting as a result of it, the regulatory maneuvers that they're getting as a result of it. If you're a rich person, if you're a corporation, this is absolutely the most business savvy thing that you can be doing. And it's not to say that, I mean, I think there is a degree of just badness and evil in some of these corporations, whether we're talking about Facebook allowing their algorithms to harm young girls and their mental well-being, or Exxon knowing that climate change was happening for forever. Like, there's that, right? But at the end of the day, we're talking about corporations have a responsibility to get the most profit for their shareholders in the quickest way possible. That is in complete conflict with the needs of working people, especially the employers and the employees and stakeholders in those companies. The role of government is to challenge that and to be the check on that power. How can government do that if they're in bed with the corporations? That's why we're seeing the degradation of all of these institutions and our ability to work and earn an honest living.
Two things I want to say that came up when you were just talking. To put this into context, just like Elon's wealth, I saw this guy break it down. 1 million seconds is a little over 11 days. 1 billion seconds is over 31 years. And if we're talking about Tesla and going into the first trillion, 1 trillion seconds is 31,000 years. The difference between 11 days, 31 years, and 31,000 years, just to show like what that kind of like wealth gap disparity looks like. When you're talking about corporations keeping all this money and not paying their workers a fair share, there was also that this kind of went viral. Senator Hawley, I don't know if that rings a bell, from
Josh
Missouri.
Hawley from Missouri.
He was like cross-examining the CEO of Boeing. What was your salary last year? And the guy was like, it was a lot. And he was like, it was $33 million. And he was like, that was a 45% increase from the year before.
Yeah.
And then he was like, you have 32,000 machinists. And then the guy was like, yeah. And he's like, and they only got a 1% wage increase in 8 years. So he was like grilling the CEO of Boeing, being like, you're saying that, you know, your workers aren't doing X, Y, Z, but he's like, I don't think it's your workers. I think it's the leadership, and just totally grilled him.
I've seen these clips too. Senator Josh Hawley is a very conservative senator, and he's like a pretty right-wing senator. He's done this weird thing in U.S. Senate committees.
Yeah.
He will bring CEOs and grill them.
Yeah.
Like he's a Democrat or like an actual working class person.
Yep.
And then he turns around and votes for their tax cuts. You're like, what are you doing, Josh Hawley? And he's clearly trying to run on this populist scheme. I think the nefarious thing is like everybody knows that politics is corrupt, right? But Trump was the guy who went up there and said, it's corrupt. I know it's corrupt because I bribed these homies. Something about the transparency of corruption was almost appealing to people. Yep. So I think that's the thing that Trump kind of like got into, is like, you know, they're doing it behind closed doors. I'm just doing it out here.
That coupled with this almost defeatist mentality we have on the money in politics issue, we've given up on actually challenging it. So then when someone comes along and say, well, at least I'm not going to hide it from you. I'm just going to just tell you exactly what I'm doing, which obviously still isn't true. He's still hiding and lying. I was just reading an article about the influence Qatar has had on his foreign policy and all of the money funneling into his campaign. And that's not something he's bragging about either.
And that's not even the money in politics issue. So for the listeners, Trump's family is benefiting to the tunes of billions of dollars from the Middle East into the Trump Corporation. The sons are making deals with Middle Eastern nationals, and so is Jared Kushner, his son-in-law. They've paid $1 billion for a new Trump golf course in the Middle East. They're giving him a $400 million Air Force One jet to him personally. This is not even money in politics anymore,
This is
right?
straight up corruption.
They're like, hey, we're just going to pay. Which is like, do you think if it came out that some politician was getting direct handouts from corporations, the public would be like, you can't do that? Or are we at this point where everyone's like, it's corrupt?
I think it's something where people need to see some kind of impact with their advocacy. If they don't see actual impact, then why would they show up? Why would they show up to vote? That's why they stayed home during the last election, because we've been promised change since Obama and not shit's happened in that time. So what's the point of participating? The only way that changes is if we deliver on something. To answer your question, no, I don't think it would make a difference. We have a lot of this data that shows just how much money these politicians are getting from corporations, right? We can trace their votes and compare it to the money they're getting from these corporations. And because they've really like locked up all of these levers of power that the people are supposed to have to hold them accountable, unless we can make some kind of deliverance where we can prove showing up to vote can make a difference, things aren't going to change. That's why I think these midterms are going to be super, super important, because this is going to be the chance for people to show up and vote and actually put people in office that they believe are going to be fighting for them. And then we can build on that momentum to get real change done. This needs to be like New Deal on steroids in the next 10 years, or else we're cooked, truly.
Yeah. And well, some of what you were just saying also has me thinking, because I feel like a lot of the root causes that got us here are also happening on the community side, not just the political side, and all of the corruption. I mean, when I went to the AOC Fight the Oligarchy tour, they were talking about, the one way to get us out of here is community. And they had us look around and say hi to our neighbor. And I really think this idea of people not just showing, like, people need to be able to show up to vote, but we also need to be showing up to our neighbor more than once every 4 years. Our civic engagement and our ability and willingness and desire to get involved in community life needs to be beyond, again, these every 4-year action or every 6-month protest. It needs to be something that we do on a consistent basis for people who have the time and money to do so. I know that there are working families that are working multiple jobs that don't have, the bandwidth, but I just think that we need to be the change that we seek. And there is something that we could all do in our day to day. This is actually like my entire reinvention, stuff that we can do in our day to day to make a difference and kind of get that hope back. I went and volunteered this weekend. That cost me a few hours of my day on Saturday, and I definitely got so much more from that experience. I was able to support them and fill my own cup of hope, realizing this is what happens when you show up. Again, that was in one area. I actually saw a post about this. We're moving more from like, it's not self-care anymore. It needs to be community care. And so just this idea that things were going to happen, like we can't just rely on vertical power. We really can't overlook the horizontal power, the relational power, the community building that we can all do. So with that, follow me on Instagram.
No, I think what you're saying though is like, at the systemic level, I think capitalism, and it's not, you can call it crony capitalism, you can call it late stage capitalism, you can call it just capitalism, whatever you want to call it, is when companies and people have to pursue profits at all costs, that will be detrimental to everything besides profits. Yeah. We will put profits above clean water for kids. We will put profits above mothers taking care of kids at home. We will put profits above doctors and healthcare patients, right? We will put profits above everything, including community. Yeah. So it's like a system-wide effect. The symptom, money in politics is a larger disease that you see across the board everywhere.
Yeah. It ties back to what you're saying too, because that's by design, this like destruction of our communal spaces and our third spaces and our ability to interact with one another and have the kind of conversations that might lead someone to get involved politically, right? We see that with the way our social media works. We see that with, like, even right now with the Warner Brothers deal that we're seeing, like what that's going to do to movie theaters. It's a place to be in community and enjoy art with one another. This really critical piece about the relentless pursuit for profit and how government is supposed to be our check on that power. What we've seen over the last 60 years is Sorota does an incredible job of, really mapping this out. But so like all of these levers that we're supposed to have, the courts, right? Like we were in law school. I witnessed the Federalist Society handpicking my classmates to start them on a track for judgeship. They buy elections like they're buying a cup of coffee. They have bribed and infiltrated all of these agencies that are supposed to be regulating their behavior. These are levers of power that we were supposed to have to hold them accountable because they have this relentless pursuit for profit that is always going to come at the cost of the consumer, the employees, the general well-being of our planet. There's always going to be a cost to that. And the fact that we still have this one last lever, that's our ability to vote. at the end of the day. We still can choose to vote these people out. I can understand why folks have gotten checked out, especially for working people who are just drowning and trying to get by to pay rent, groceries, or childcare. It's so hard to try and be engaged and pay attention to what's happening. And that's why I'm saying, let's make it as simple as possible. The litmus test is no corporate money, period. It's that simple. And it's funny because it's an easy thing for me to say because they're not coming to me to give me the money, right? It's about the incumbents. It's about the people who are trying to get reelected because they're the ones that have the incumbency advantage. That's why corporations go to them. Imagine how enticing it must be to a politician who just spent their last election dialing for dollars for 40 hours a week. And now someone is saying, here, we'll just give you $100,000 check and then you can go and do something else. But then it's always going to come with strings. And sometimes they're subtle. Sometimes they're really quiet, actively harming our interests, right? The thing about money and the way it influences you is that it's quiet and it moves slowly, but it's effective. And corporations would not be donating this money if it wasn't worth it, if it wasn't giving them the returns they wanted. That is proof enough that anyone engaging in this practice is not actually representing our best interests.
Yeah. And before we pivot topics, I just wanted to name too, I think in thinking about money and politics and then some of the stuff I was saying about community and this horizontal and vertical power, I think the real root cause and what we really hopefully need is some social norming in the US, or a cultural revolution, like truly moving away from like individualism and more towards community. I think at the end of the day, that too is the root that drives capitalism, but also us looking at someone else and thinking, you know, they're not part of my circle of care. And no, really, it's all of us against the oligarch. You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. It's not left versus right. It's top versus down, period. I think the other thing too is like thinking about expanding the way we think in the sense of time. Our lack of forethought for sustainable planning is actively harming not even just like, you know, our government structures and our communities, but even corporations. Like corporations and their inability to plan for the long term is harming their own interests as well. They're so focused on the short term and getting profit as quickly as possible. There's a book called The Day the World Stopped Shopping, and it kind of mapped out what happened during COVID and what were the companies that were able to make it through and survive without government bailouts. There was a case study of some companies in Eastern Asia and parts of Japan, and this is where sustainability and long-term thinking is embedded in their culture. You have these corporations that are actually paying attention to their employees, wanting them to stay for as long as they can, thinking about not just the next year, but like the next 100 years. That's how long these companies have lasted because they have that kind of mentality. We need to have that mentality, not just for the corporations, but for our communities, for our planet, and for our kids. And because we push things off and say that's going to be someone else's problem, we've allowed for so much harm that's ultimately going to just compound. I'm 28. I have no hopes of buying a home. I have absolutely no intention of having kids with the cost that it is right now. And that's all because of the people that are in power today that have been in power for decades that couldn't care less about what they were leaving behind for us. Now we have to go in there and take it back and actually have these plans for sustainability and what we want the future to look like, not just for ourselves, but for the next generation.
Yeah. What you saying about the, like, you're not planning to buy a home at least for the foreseeable future with the way it is right now. I also saw that the minimum wage that we would need to match the home buying power of boomers in the 1970s is $66 an hour.
Oh, wow.
I should have
Boomers?
guess.
I just
No, in
They're
right
to
now.
blame for all of
I
it.
can't stand them.
Wait, but I also need to say, because I was also shocked to find out that the federal minimum wage, anybody know what it is?
$7.25.
Yes. And it hasn't been updated since 2009. Some states have higher, like here in Colorado, we have almost 15-ish dollars an hour, but like,
And that's still not
on.
enough. In the lowest cost county in the country, the minimum wage needed to live comfortably is something like $23 an hour.
This is one of the things that progressives sometimes fall into, where they think if we just raise the minimum wage, that'll fix all these problems. But the issue is, again, when we're talking about the current capital structure and the way that these companies run, is these minimum wage issues will end up just hurting workers sometimes. And I'm all about a thriving wage and a higher minimum wage.
Yeah.
But we need to look about, why is housing going up?
Yeah.
right? Why are food prices going up? These companies also have record profits right now across the board. Housing stock, we have more people with multiple homes than ever before. Private capital, like private equity, are starting to buy up homes. I'm in the boat that we should build a lot more homes too, and we probably have way too many zoning laws and red tape, and we should do that as well.
Yeah.
My YIMBY bros are gonna,
I was about to say they're gonna come.
Yeah, they're gonna come. So I'm all about cutting the red tape and building more housing. But we should also talk about the people who are building the homes and the people who are owning the homes are these large companies. And this affordability crisis, how does that show up in the congressional campaign? Because when I think of Congress, I often don't think of it as a place where you tackle affordability.
Well, I think the thing that we have to talk about when we're talking about affordability, a lot of this is coming down to wages and corporations. Raising the minimum wage is not going to solve the whole thing. Oftentimes, if we do it in the wrong way, it is actually going to end up harming people. But there have been studies that have shown that if you do it, the way that we need to is incrementally, right? We have to raise it slowly over a period of about 5 years or so. Studies have shown that we actually increase the number of jobs that are in these areas, right? There's a way to do it.
I don't want the minimum wage, though, to be a substitution for unionization.
I'm getting to that. I completely agree. Because the number one thing that destroyed the purchasing power of the working class in this country was the degradation of union power, the ability to unionize, the ability to organize and actually hold to account the bosses, right? There needs to be more regulations. There needs to be higher taxes on the rich from the federal level. But the number one priority that we need to have after protecting our most basic needs like housing, healthcare, and food is to make sure that we bring back the easiest access to building a union, creating a union, joining a union, and challenging the employers, because those are the folks that actually know what they're doing, right? Like we can pass all these standardized laws across the country, but oftentimes they're going to mismatch for the different industries they're in, and it might actually end up doing more harm than good. The real knowledge of how to run a company best and make sure that the employers are getting what they're needing, and then also providing the input that a lot of corporations need from the people actually doing the work on the ground, is going to come from unions. We were at our best when we had strong unions in the country. The first thing I tell everybody is join a union. Just join a union right now. And you're technically all a part of a union. It's cheesy, but we are technically all a part of the American Union. But join a second union. Join a second one.
Unions really did save me as a federal employee when everything started happening. I mean, unions have been organizing for feds like crazy. Just having that firsthand experience, them really helping coordinate everything as we have the dismantling of agencies and large-scale rifts. One of the things you were talking about is this idea, and I had actually heard this. Do you guys know Senator Slotskin? She was talking about this idea that if we have global companies paying their workers so little, they need to rely on federal benefits like Medicaid and food stamps, they should lose their eligibility for tax incentives, these large corporations, because otherwise the government is basically giving them a big tax break and their employees are going hungry using federal benefits. And so essentially the taxpayer are paying twice for their corporate greed.
Walmart's a great example of this. Amazon too.
And McDonald's. They're all some of the top employers for folks that are getting federal benefits right now. Yeah. And they're also getting the incentives at the same time. I completely
And they all
agree
don't
with
have
that.
a union.
Yeah.
Well, and then, okay, again, just helping people contextualize, because I think sometimes people aren't sure how this is really showing up in our day to day. But if you make $60,000 a year, you pay $36 a year to support food stamps for other people, but you're paying $700 in corporate subsidies.
Corporations, they need every taxpayer dollar.
The thing is, corporations are the problem. We are giving more money of our, we're giving more of our money to corporations versus actually safety social net programs that we know are needed. When people have SNAP benefits, that reduces local crime. It also reduces domestic violence. These are safety net programs for a reason. We need kids to be fed. I don't think the average person realizes that they're giving more money a year to corporations versus paying into social safety net programs that help and keep our community strong.
I spend a lot of time talking to people who are like disillusioned of the establishment, and they're like, oh, I hate Republicans and I hate Democrats. Oftentimes they're like, why would I want to pay taxes? My roads are broken, my schools feel underfunded, and my taxes go to fund bombs overseas or wars overseas. So little of our tax base actually goes to services, and it ends up going to these wasteful things, handouts to big arms companies that are funding bombs overseas, or huge tax breaks for companies. I think that's a really good example.
Helps contextualize it. Pissed me off the most when I was figuring out, because my PhD is going to be in, the dissertation is in money and politics and how it's impacting. Yeah. So there's some data that shows if you live in a blue state versus in a red state, you are likely to live 5 to 7 years longer. They controlled for laws that were related to public education, public safety, healthcare. And I'm trying to see if there is a correlation between strong democratic indicators. Do you have anti-corruption laws? Do you have strong money and politics laws? Do you have things like term limits? How much of your constituency is actually actively voting for the things that they want to see in their state legislature? Because the reality is we actually agree on a lot of these things. We agree that we need to raise the minimum wage. We agree that corporations are not paying their fair share, that wealthy people aren't paying their fair share. We agree that we need to pay our teachers more. We agree that we need to have stronger laws to help the environment and prevent the worst climate catastrophes. We really agree on a lot of these things, just barely over 50%. Most of these things we agree to the tune of 60, 70, sometimes 80%. And if we're talking about reversing Citizens United, that's at 90+% approval. We don't agree on anything at 90+%, but we agree on reversing Citizens United. And the thing that I remind folks that are disillusioned about this system and not wanting to vote and not wanting to engage, if you're in an area or a district where you don't have any candidates that are speaking to the things that you care about, run. You run or you find somebody else to run. But if you do have a candidate, vote for them. Yeah. Engage, volunteer, knock on doors, because they've taken over all of these different levers of power for a reason. At the end of the day, we outnumber them. We still have the power on our end. They have made it so that we believe that we don't have the power. It's actually hard for us to get anything done, but we do. If every single person in Denver that was disenfranchised, who was low income, who belonged to a minority group, these are all of the same folks that are low propensity voters. If they all turned out and vote, we would completely change the electoral base in this city. We've allowed these narratives of us being in, like, we don't have control. The corporations have taken over everything. They're in charge of it all. And like to some extent they are, but we can take it back whenever we choose to. And I think that's really important to remind folks. I agree. The Democratic Party has failed for a long, long time, and we need to hold them to account. I hope we can get to a place where we get away from the two-party system. Until then, this is the party that has the most infrastructure to get us to a win. Let's take it over. There's no reason we cannot force the Democratic Party to actually represent our values in a way that they once did, because they used to. They really used to. We got the New Deal for a reason, because we held the party to account. We just have to do the same thing again.
This was great. I'm really, really glad, Melat, that we had you on. And don't forget to check out the video. What was on Melat's?
Yeah. My socials are just Melat Kiros Co. Our Justice Dems endorsement ad is on there. I'm on a roof. It's wacky, but we're doing it. We're doing the thing.
I want to end with our call to action. Given the theme of today's discussion, I hope we've built a case for why it's so important to have everyday people show up and support candidates that align with their mission and values that they truly believe in. And again, I guess if you don't find one in your community running, then you should run yourself. But that seems like a big call to action. So instead, I want to plug that if you could set up a donation, $5, $10, something on a reoccurring basis to a candidate in your area, or if you want to make a one-off donation, that would be something that's really helpful, because it really is the power of small donations that politicians need right now, especially those who do not want to take corporate money. And Melat, I think you had something else too about evidence of this, right?
Yeah. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, she has risen to prominence in the last, 8 years that she's been in office. She's been hammering this issue of money in politics for a really long time. It's actually been reported that she's the number one fundraiser in the Democratic Party right now. She's even outraising Hakeem Jeffries, the Speaker of the House, and it's not even close. And she's doing it because she has these small recurring donors, $5, $10. I see ads from her all the time asking for $3, even $1.
I think I've been a $3 donor for 8 years.
There you go. And that adds up. it adds up so quickly. $3 doesn't even buy you a cup of coffee anymore. So throw it to a candidate and support the folks that are trying to do the good fight. Not taking corporate PAC money means that things are harder, and they should be, because that means that we're actually meeting people where they are and listening to the issues that they care about. So let's support those folks with small dollar donations.
This is not necessarily a plug for Melat, but for all progressives.
Yes. Find the people running in your district and support them. And if you have really great people, find people in other districts and support them. This is going to be an all hands on deck mission.
Exactly. If everybody did a little bit, I plugged already the Kyle Clark, his thing, which is $5 donations, but in 5 years, they raised $15 million. So I just want to say, it really is the power of small actions.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. This was great.
Nice. Amazing. Well, that's it. That's it. All we have for this episode. As always, subscribe to our YouTube, Spotify, Apple. Share this with a friend. Leave us a 5-star review. No one's actually left us comments or a voicemail, but do that too.
Oh, we haven't talked
People
about
comment on the Instagram all the time, so just keep commenting on the Instagram. Yeah.
There you go.
Well, thank you so much.